Junkies made a lot of videos. I'm gonna respond to his video on I think the beautiful people and uh, the mating thing. Uh, his observations are definitely spot on. Um, However, let's introduce a new topic to add on to what he said in this video. Is this the plight of the woman in prison? Let's look at it's particularly because he made his videos in Portland. It's in the United States. The American female prisoner. Let's talk about that a little bit. We all know that the American prison. You all know that there are statistically more men than women in prison. So being a female prisoner could be a different type of struggle, especially if they're released. Because then it's like, you compare this woman, compare themselves to other women, and like, you know, it's like almost a relative deprivation where you don't, you know, where they're like, it's like they were in prison. And it would feel kind of awful. But um, so anyway, but his comments in the video is it's just his observations are totally spot on. Um, totally accurate. It's just you know, it's just that if someone has like estrogen and stuff like that, you're just gonna have these, you're gonna have these habits, and you know, yeah, sometimes certain life experiences could. However, um, it's very unlikely because this here's the thing I've observed. Because he made this video in the United States and he's lived in this country his whole life except for a few bouts of vacation. He went to a trip in Europe, right? So basically, uh, the United States has never had a war in their homeland. That's very important. I mean, we had the Mexican American War, but that doesn't really count because the United States was never invaded their homeland for the most part. So so you could see that you know he went to Europe and it's really different. It's because Europe, these European countries, what is it, Italy, Spain, or even if you went to France or Germany, they've had history of many years of being invaded, their whole country being invaded. The United States has not had that experience ever, so it really changes the culture. I'm like, well, why would history have anything to? It's very important. It does change the types of people involved. However, that doesn't mean that the folks that have traveled, it's like, let's say there are people who have been abroad for a very long time, even like 6 months, for example. It's a long time. There are people who have had those experiences. They've been to a different country for more than 6 months, and um, it's a long time to experience different culture and speak their language. Um, so how does that have anything to do with the meaning and the beautiful? Because I watch his videos and I'll tell you that the American people, they've never had a war. They've never been invaded. Or they never had a war that caused their homeland to be invaded. Because of that, you know, also you also have to consider that the United States does not border any country on the east and the west, only the north and the south. What borders the east and the west are just oceans. That makes a big difference because if it's north and south only, then it's clearly there's a geographic climate difference. Canada is very cold, while Mexico is much warmer. So, it's just that makes a big difference. It creates a culture, and also the United States is just a few hundred years old. So that also affects the people that are involved. Um, I mean, and also the types of people who immigrate. You know, I mean, there are immigrants that are, the immigrants that you should be looking for in this case are immigrants who've been in prison for a significant amount of time, at least 2 years, and then they immigrate. You should be looking for those folks. All right, I'm gonna end the video there. I'm like, why would you have to look for those folks? Because they've been in prison in a different country for many years. It changes them. In contrast, if you get immigrants who've never been in prison, they're going to adapt to the culture really quickly. Because, like, someone who's been in prison for at least that long, a year, in like Europe or Asia, wherever it is, or even Africa, or Australia, or like Antarctica, yeah, you get the idea. They've been. It's like, they know what suffering is like. You know, so a lot of junkies probably suffered quite a bit. Struggled quite a bit. You know, and just saying. A, a lot of other immigrants. I'm not saying they didn't struggle, if they didn't go to prison, but if they went to prison for at least a year and before they immigrated to the United States, let's just say they may be more understanding. All right. I'm not saying they would they had like a daughter or something. No. That's not what I meant. I meant like they things would just click. And I'm just not saying they would be friends or anything. It's just you notice that there's a difference among immigrants who came here who have been in prison in their homeland for at least a year compared to the other types of immigrants. There's a big difference. I mean, obviously there's language barrier, but there's also difference in other things. And it's like, well, how does that have anything to do with mating or the looks? Because I watched a lot of Japanese video, and I'm just like, I'm getting the sense that a lot of people he's encountered are born in this area and raised in this area. And they're never going to mention their parents. And of course, they're not going to mention it because they have nothing in common with if their parents are immigrants, they would have nothing in common with them. And if their parents are not immigrants, that only their grandparents or great grandparents are immigrants. I mean, you get the idea. It's not going to click. You're not going to be able to click, right? Because they can't understand what you've suffered. They can't understand what the logic has suffered. They're only going to see the logic as during temper tantrums. I've read Malcolm Gladwell, I understand, and it's like, there's a lot of people in this world are very naive, and Americans are very naive people. So the hard part that I think the logic is struggling with, and actually I'm struggling with it too, is being able to distinguish what types of people conjugate in which areas, which restaurants go to, when to, you should go to this place at this time. It's just like this is something like some people would, they just know, but I think the launch junkie and actually myself as well, we kind of struggle with these things. This is what a lot of people consider like street smarts or common sense in some cases. You know, it's just like we tend to, and this requires a lot of thinking. You have to understand, where would these types of people be? Where would they be? Like if there's like a coffee shop or if you want to meet new people or a bar, you have to know which bar it is, and then you have to know when. It's very difficult. This is what distinguishes successful people from, folks who've had bad strokes of luck. This sometimes is, but that's just one of it. That's one of many things in life, right? And it's like, however, I don't know. Maybe the logic does know these things. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's only me that struggle with these things. It's just like, um, you know, it's not like necessarily just finding a girlfriend or whatnot. It's just, you have to understand what types of people conjugate in which. It's like, like You know, let's list all the places. And we got a few minutes. I have to do this quickly. Uh, movie theater, library, you know, coffee shop, bar, grocery store. You know, you gotta know where these places are and when, and the specifics and the details are very important.